Welcome to another dimension, a dimension of insight, a dimension of understanding. You are entering a place where reality collides with truth. There are no limits, there are no boundaries. This is Off Planet Radio.
Tonight. I've been following our guests on and off for as long as they've been around. When I listen to them, I always feel like I'm amongst friends, and we seem to have been walking sort of parallel paths, having different experiences, but always seeming to arrive at about the same place at about the same time. And here we are tonight. They are the creators of Truth Frequency Radio Network and the hosts of Beyond the Veil Radio. I'm so glad to have you two here. Chris and Sheree Geo, welcome to Off Planet Radio.
Thank you for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, welcome, guys.
Cool. So just in case I'm sure a lot of our audience is probably familiar with you guys, but in case they're not, can you guys tell us just a little bit about yourselves and how you got to where you are?
Sure. I was somewhat of a troll on the Prison Planet forum, not in the traditional sense, but rather I was challenging people to think outside of the box. And Sheree was a moderator there, and she was assigned to keep an eye on me. So...
Well, oh my gosh. Wow.
It wasn't as much like that as it was. I asked the head moderator, because I was just a mod with the eugenics forum, that whole portion with eugenics and mind control and that kind of thing. And that was my area of specialty. And so he's asking about the no planes theory. And so I asked the lead moderator, hey, who is this guy? And he's like, oh, he's probably a troll. You need to keep an eye on him. And then we started talking more and more off air. And we didn't speak to each other for like a year. And then when I came back, because I had some family issues I had to deal with, I had a relative who passed away. So when I came back, it's as if we just picked up right where we left off. And within a month, he was asking me to come see David Icke with him.
Well, I was joking. It was like just a joke. I said, hey, do you want to run off and see David Icke with me? And she lived about 3 hours away. And David Icke was performing in Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Yeah.
And she said, yeah, come and pick me up. And I said, no, I can't do that. And she said, no, really, come and pick me up. I went and picked her up, and the rest is history. The natural progression was to just apply the knowledge that we had, start a radio show, and take it from there. We had no idea that it would turn into what it's turned into. It was just a blog talk radio show back then. And it's turned into a whole station, 33 hosts, and just absolutely incredible.
It's an amazing dream come true, really, for us.
Awesome. Yeah, you guys.
So let me ask you this, Chris. Did you have a background before in media at all? And putting a network together like this? It sounds like things just kind of came together over time. But do you have a background in media?
Not really. I have a background in audio engineering. So,
all right, well, that's useful.
I was into music. I was writing hip-hop tracks for a record label down in Dallas. Going way before that, though, I was actually a DJ at a rave DJ. I spun trance and drum and bass and things like that. So I was really heavily involved in the rave scene in the late 90s. So all of this knowledge that I obtained, I started to apply into what we were doing later on down the line. It was just incredible how it all came together. The rave scene, I didn't realize at the time as a DJ that the DJ is actually the shaman and leading the crowd. Had I known back then what I know now, I would have done my sets completely different.
Absolutely. So you just to fill in here the information, you guys kind of started off more like on the sort of truther kind of track, and then have evolved over time into more the consciousness and, you know, spirituality and multidimensional layers of everything kind of realm. Yes?
Yeah, and what's funny is I did an album called Global Resistance, and the last track on it is called Consciousness, where the album kind of ends, and then there's like another part that's supposed to come after that. But I really didn't understand what consciousness was at the time. It was only in hindsight that I realized, oh, this is where we're leaving off and then picking up later in another project. It was really funny how it came together. I posted the track We're in a Lot of Trouble, and Michael Tsarian wrote me and said, hey, can I use this in one of my DVDs? And I said, yeah, sure, absolutely. I love your work. I'm a big fan, so on and so forth. And when we started the radio show, we were able to call him up and say, hey, Michael, can you come on our show? We're nobody. We have 10 listeners and that's it. We're on Blog Talk. But can you do us this favor? He said, yeah, absolutely. And then he introduced us to his audience, and it just kind of blew up from there.
Yeah, and then you guys went down the slippery slope of other radio networks and all that kind of jazz before deciding you just needed to do your own thing, yeah?
Learning experiences.
There was a learning curve to this, for sure. There were some encounters with some people that were less than reputable, but when you get into this, you know, with a pure heart, you think that everybody else is like that too. And you think, wow, you know, I'm in the truth movement. I'm going to make a change. I'm going to start, just networking with all these different people. And at least in our experience, we really didn't have the discernment going into it. And then it hit me like 2 years later, like, you know, it's the truth movement. Of course, it's going to be the most infiltrated group in existence. Like, why would it not be?
Well,
but it took a couple of years for me to realize that.
Well, and not only that, but we get into this thinking that there's no ego because we're all looking for the truth. We're just looking for the truth. And so, oh, okay, great, no ego. But then as soon as you step into it, even just half a step in, you realize, oh, there's ego everywhere in here. And so we had to kind of shelter ourselves for a little bit to kind of regroup, and eventually we just started our own radio network.
But then the consciousness aspect of it came in when we realized that this was kind of the next logical progression in the quest for truth, because you can understand that the government's corrupt, you can understand that they're setting up FEMA camps and so on and so forth, but when you take it to the next level and really understand why they're doing all of this, you realize that as a humanity, we have a soul, and the soul is very, very sick. And this is really the undertone as to why we're seeing so much hate, death, chaos, destruction, so on and so forth. So naturally, we want to try to heal that. And I've realized as time progressed that we've got a lot of brothers and sisters here, and they're all star seeds. They've all come from another place, higher dimension, I would say. We've come down here to help the world ascend, and we're all coming together now in 2017. I mean, it's just absolutely beautiful. I would go so far as to say that the Donald Trump situation is a marker of a new timeline that we were able to actually shift as all of us, all of the light workers here did their work, shifted it into this new timeline. Now we have to maintain it. Not saying that Donald Trump is the best thing since sliced bread or even a positive entity. However, it's a marker to show that the old power structure has been dissolved. The old timeline has been dissolved. The Clinton regime has been taken out of office, and now we have a new path in front of us.
I just had that same identical conversation with a friend of mine about a half an hour ago.
Did you?
And no, and the interesting thing is we know that something changed on election night, and it was almost surreal in a lot of ways because it was so unexpected. But at the same time, I think what happened there was a dynamic kicked in that is giving us a space right now to work in a way we couldn't have worked had it gone the other way. It doesn't have anything to do with the front end personalities. It has to do with the energetic that's going on in the background of the political machine. Political machine is just a mechanism. It's a front end mechanism. What's driving it is consciousness. So like this whole consciousness thing is huge, and it's a process that you go through to get to where you start to understand how that operates.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Sheree. No, go ahead.
I was going to say one more thing. It seems like as a society, as a culture, or as a people in general, we're moving towards something. And whether that something is this giant backlash that you see against, the whole Clinton crime family foundation, or the Pizzagate and things like that, what they want is a huge backlash. when Donald Trump was running for office, they wanted us to think, oh, he's never going to get in office. Oh, he's a loser. He's this, he's that. And people might even agree with them on the surface and say, oh yeah, Trump's an asshole. But then, you know, they silently walk into the ballot box and they vote for him anyway, because they know deep down inside that's what's better. And so it was like this it's this huge undercurrent of change that we're trying to bring about. And at the same time, if we have too much change, or if we get too hostile or too aggressive with this, then it'll backfire, because the Hegelian dialectic actually prescribes that we have a huge backlash that is required in order for them to bring in the FEMA camps and bring in the martial law and all of that. But if we stay calm, if we keep doing what we're doing, we're going to win this.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I meant to bring this up as something I wanted to talk about, but I'll just lay it here. I think we're at this spot where lots of people have been doing lots of work in the background. We're all amongst them. And now it's kind of like the 3% thing, right? With the American Revolution. There's some of us who've been toiling hard in the background. And actually something that kind of the three of you, and me to a certain extent, we all have in common, is having it's really taken ourselves from a point A very far along to a point B, all having broken certain kinds of programming. Sheree, I know you come from a very religious background. Your father was a pastor, correct?
Oh, and grandfather.
Yeah. And Randy was in Christian radio. He comes from a very Christian family as well, was in Christian radio for a number of years. And then, also, I think you both, from what I understand about your background, Chris, a little bit, came from a period of time where you were into the whole kind of patriot sort of movement, and Randy was into that as well. And then all of us have also, and this is a big thing, even though we all are interested in the truth, I think we've all broken truther programming, because that's a mind control program too. And so we've come this really, really, we've done all this work here, and now there's people starting, you can see it, even the people who are arguing about the Donald Trump, the Hillary Clinton, and all the social justice nonsense and all this kind of stuff. Those people who want to protest, and they still don't quite understand that's exactly what they want. They want all these massive protests. But I'm starting to see a few little gems pop up and go, hey, wait a second. Look at this here. This doesn't make any sense. This thing that the liberals are talking about, that's not very liberal. Wait a second. All right, it's not what they've been saying it is on TV. It's actually something else. It might be better or it might be worse than what they're saying, but it isn't what they're talking about. There's something else going on here. So I'm starting to see people who you would never have suspected start to catch on to a little something. And I think it is, in some ways, a culmination of the work that people have been doing in the background to break massive amounts of programming all this time, that now everyone else kind of, the more general public is having the opportunity to do it without, they don't need to know all about all this stuff we know about. There's not time for that. What do you guys think about that? I mean, about the idea of having broken out of all this, breaking out of one programming to the next. But I think that, we're kind of, we've reached past that final layer here. What do you think?
I think you're absolutely spot on. And I can take it an even step further. The John Birch Society preaches the 1776, closed borders, so on and so forth. My analysis of the New World Order is that they want one entity controlling several different factions in prison cities where everybody's locked in, you can't move around, you can't do all of that. The thing that they fear the most is unity. So what people like the John Birch Society have done is pushed people or programmed people into moving back into that close the borders, build a wall, so on and so forth kind of mentality, when in actual fact, they're moving more towards the New World Order that they want, which is one entity controlling everybody. When in actual fact, we should be tearing down borders. We should be uniting together and realizing that they see us versus them. They don't see black, white, Christian, Muslim, so on and so forth. And we need to start seeing on the same dynamic. That's the only way that we're going to be on an even playing field. But as long as they keep us divided, that's exactly where they want us. And part of the truther programming, and I like the way you framed that, and a lot of people, I can see them getting upset over this kind of dialogue and this kind of lingo, but really they have to realize that this is just another box that they've been put into. Now, it's a box outside of the standard box, but there's still many more boxes. And we always have to constantly question, our belief systems, our BS, have they put us in another box? And if so, how do we break out of it?
Well, and I think Randy could agree with me that Christian radio is a whole different animal than regular radio. I think I actually remember listening to your voice at some point, Randy. I think that's why your voice sounds familiar to me. But yeah, I remember when growing up that if any kind of outside idea tried to wiggle its way in, it would result in just utter chaos in the minds of the people around me. And I never could understand why, why is Clinton being talked about so much in 1996 when, I'm 13 years old. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, what is all of this? And so I can completely understand how the Christian programming, even if broken, could just lead straight to the truther programming, which can't be broken if you're still kind of already in the Christian programming. It's an overlap that binds you in.
The Christian Patriot movement was interesting for a while because these were people who were basically espousing a faith that was based on individual freedom, but it actually became its own walled city after a while as well. And then obviously what you had in the 1990s, you had the Montana Freemen, you had Waco, you had Ruby Ridge, you had all of these scary scenarios which were hits against the Patriot movement, all Christian. I mean, you could argue about what David Koresh represented, but that was a religious community. And so there was a backlash to all of that. And the scary part was watching now as it was Bibles, bullets, and survival food, which fed this whole industry that then became this Patriot radio juggernaut that Alex Jones came from. I was on networks that Alex Jones was on when he was coming up. And, I think he did a good job. I think he's put a message out there, but I've also told people over the years, you got to think about what Alex Jones doesn't talk about and the things that he's saying that are galvanizing a hard core in this country that was obviously going to lead us to a place where we were going to wind up being in a shooting gallery. And the Christian side of it was it's schismatic. It's always been schismatic. You introduce one idea that they consider heretical and you're tarred and feathered. Well, that happened to me about a half dozen times. I mean, I was a complete radical. I got to the point where the second year on I walked on to shortwave radio talking about Zionism, not a popular subject at the time. Talking about what was going on in Palestine and Gaza and what the Zionist agenda was. And as you can imagine, there was a lot of backlash. So my message by the second year was basically get the hell out of your churches. They're apostate. The Spirit's not allowed to move there anymore. 5 years down the road, I'm like, I'm reading this Bible now and I'm going, this Yahweh guy, he isn't looking good to me. There's a lot of sacrifice and blood and war going on. You know where I'm going? And I know you do because I took some time to listen to a couple of your shows, Chris, the one that you did on the Luciferian Christ consciousness.
Oh, they strung me up and nailed me to a cross for that.
Oh,
one.
yeah. I sat by the whole time crying like Mary. It was awful.
But it's truthful. I mean, when you break out of the programming, when you break out of the religious programming,
yeah,
and get down to the spirit, you start. The way that I like to look at the world is a very simple standard of good versus evil. Good is anything that preserves life and preserves freedom. Evil is anything that impedes upon life and impedes upon freedom. I think 99.999% of sentient beings can agree upon that standard.
Yeah.
So when you apply this standard to this Yahweh character, you realize, hey, wait a minute, there's something seriously wrong here. This is a character that has indiscriminately killed the entire world. I mean, if you read the Bible, he flooded the whole world.
He's an
literally
sociopath,
right.
If you look at his actions from the Old Testament.
That's not to discount the ideas that Jesus brought to the table. Because he talked about love, he talked about unity, he talked about consciousness.
Yeah.
And if you look at the Gnostic versions of the Jesus character, he was a mystic. He was exactly like what we're doing right now, just trying to elevate the consciousness and trying to get people to love one another. And I'm starting to hear in the Christian circles now, I was just listening to a radio show on TFR that's Christian based, and the guest said, hey, you know what? I think this Yahweh guy is not who we think he is. And I thought, finally, they're starting to get it now. It's about love and nothing more.
It's so hard to get out of that paradigm. And, just briefly, I know we haven't gotten into the psychedelics yet, but I had a psychedelic experience where I was shown crosses. And I think, maybe you guys can chime in on this later on in the broadcast too, but I saw crosses and I thought, okay, well, crosses mean Jesus, and I don't see Jesus anywhere. So where's God? Where's the God of the Bible? And then suddenly I was lowered into this pit, like really quick, like I fell into a pit, and this bright light comes down on me. And it wasn't a white light of beauty and love or anything like that. This was like a 10-year-old dousing a slug with salt. That's what it felt like. That was blinding me. And I was like, stop. And it just kept hitting me over and over again from every direction. And it almost drove me insane. That was the only psychedelic experience that I've ever asked to meet Yahweh face to face, and it's the last one I will ever do too.
That's interesting.
Well, it is really interesting how, though, what I'm starting to notice is what the psychedelics do is just show you your programming. Whether it was direct kind of forms of mind control, like I was telling you about, or whether it's these things that are supposedly Christian, patriot, truth, good, whatever, it shows you your programming. You know what I mean? And so it's an opportunity to either be further programmed by it or to go, wait a second. I see the structure of this. Let's start breaking it down and see what happens then. So we'll get back to psychedelics in a little bit, but I'm glad you shared that story there. So, okay, so breaking these kinds of programming, then we move into a truth movement, and we get into things like 9/11 is an inside job, and even the truthers who can mostly agree about that, then they're fighting about planes, no planes, were there bombs in the building, was it directed energy weapons, was it nuclear, whatever, right? Or on and on with any kind of the chemtrails. Is it the metal and barium? Is it microprocessors in there? Everyone, we're all agreeing there's something there, but everyone's kind of divided in their groups, just like you said, just like they like it. But over this period of time, people have become wiser, so they've had to become more creative in the things that they present us, which kind of moves us to what's been going on the last couple of years, and that is the flat earth and then the Mandela effect. And you guys, of all the people who've really talked about it extensively and done work on it, I like the way you guys deal with it the best. So me and Randy talk about this sometimes. We really enjoyed the exercise. That's what we see it as, of what the flat earth thing represented. So can you tell me, I know you were really into it for a little while. What did you think when you saw this coming? Did you feel like you kind of fell into some of that programming before and then worked your way out of it? Or did you always sort of see it as what it was, an exercise to sort of understand that, we're not dealing with an either or thing, we're dealing with a both and kind of thing? Tell me about your experience with the flat earth.
Well, that was the second time I got nailed to a cross and crucified. When I started talking about that, people went nuts. And it was very indicative, in my opinion, as to where people really are. Because if you're really seeking the truth, then you're going to seek it wherever it leads you, and you're going to follow it wherever the truth leads you. And when I first presented the idea, the people closest around to me, the way that they reacted, I don't need to look into this, you're stupid, you're this and that, which is the natural reaction for everybody. A friend of mine came to me about a year before that, and he said, I've been looking into this flat earth theory, and I think there's some legitimacy to it. And I looked at Sheree and I said, he's lost his mind. It was just, I had the same knee-jerk reaction to it. So everybody does have the same knee-jerk reaction to it.
And it sounds ridiculous. It sounds yeah.
It sounds like a trap. It sounds like they want to paint people as flat earthers and so on and so forth. Right. But then when you start to lift the veil and go beyond it, you start to go, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense about the globe theory. This doesn't make sense. Wait, are you telling me that all the photos from NASA are fake? They're satellite composites. Is that really what I've been looking at this entire time? And it starts to fall apart.
And it's pretty much the same composite. There aren't even that many different ones. It's pretty much, we've been looking at the same one over and over again.
Right. And the land, even Mr. Blue Marble, I forget what his name is, but he did an interview and he said, my job is to take all the satellite images and they're all flat images and turn them into a sphere and make them look the way people expect it to look.
Right.
This is not even trying to hide it. They're like, this is what we do and this is what we've been doing. So, but to me, what that did is that allowed me to open up my mind enough to now am I not only questioning the government, and am I not only questioning religion, but now I'm questioning this entire reality, which has broken so many boundaries and allowed me to think in an even deeper and bigger dynamic. And I think that's what the flat earth is ultimately the most useful for. And a lot of people will stop there, and it's perfectly fine. If you don't want to go, past that boundary, then you've already set up where your truth ends, and that's fine. But ultimately, the conclusion that I've come to is that, I mean, I guess, saying it just right out, it sounds a little bit crazy, but we're living in a computer simulated hologram, essentially. And you have the way a hologram works is there's a 3-dimensional image projected on a 2-dimensional surface. So some people see the 3-dimensional image and think it's real. Some people see the flat surface and think it's real, but ultimately it's all a simulation. There was a guy named Professor Gates, and he's a quantum physicist, and he found a computer code written in the fabric of space-time. Now, it's not just any computer code. It's a computer code based on a guy's code named Claude Shannon.
The French guy, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why are they finding his computer code? Computer code is pretty extensive. Like, I write computer code for a living, and it's not just like a couple of words or a couple of symbols. This is like a long code inside of
this is like a computer checksum, right? Is this not?
Yeah,
it's basically.
It's an entire language. It's a self-correcting code that they found in the fabric of reality. So why is this guy's code in reality? This has to be a hologram. The question is, when were we injected into this simulation, and why? Maybe Viru came in 2012 and this is the afterlife, or maybe this is our consciousness was injected by some kind of extraterrestrials that are moving us to another planet. I mean, there's so many different ways you can think about this, and it just opens up so many doors of possibility. But we'll never find out the reason why. But we do see that there's something really going on in reality with reality that is not correct. And then we have Mandela effect and so on and so forth. But let me say this really quick. Understanding that this is a computer program then allows you to change reality and manipulate it in your particular sphere the way that you want. Manifesting reality suddenly.
You just said sphere. It's not a sphere. No, I'm just kidding.
Well, reality is a sphere. So,
Reality is a sphere. Yeah.
My own sphere here.
You ball licker. What are you talking about?
Oh, that's another.
Are you a baller?
The way that everybody is fighting with one another.
I know, this is insane.
We lost all manners, all interaction, social skills with each other. It's like, what happened here?
It became cults, warring cults, the whole thing. Flat earthers were just hating on ball earthers, and ball earthers are going, you people were morons. And I watched all these YouTube, and for a while I was like, oh my God, these people were declaring war over the shape of their world. Really?
Mm-hmm. Well, we put out a video called Believers and Truth Seekers. And in that video, we made the point that a colorblind person isn't working with the same data set as somebody who can see colors. Who's right? Who's wrong? Who's stupid? Who's crazy? Nobody. It's all really just a matter of perspective. But we made it so ambiguous that we had ball earthers and flat earthers calling us shills simultaneously in the comment section. It was hilarious.
Well, that's exactly like, I just made I made a comment on a page that I'm a private group on Facebook that I'm a member of that looks at cloaked cloudcraft. Mm-hmm. And I just someone had a picture of the moon, and they were talking about how the moon feels closer than it used to. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I've kind of always, for many years now, I've thought the moon is maybe 80 to 200 miles away. And now I think it might even be closer. I said, it feels like they're lowering the ceiling or something. And somebody in the group took that to mean that I was saying that we have a flat earth and that there's a dome. And it wasn't even what I was thinking about, right? And so he started a whole shitstorm that got people kicked out of the group. Like, I had nothing to do with it. I wasn't even there for the argument. But literally, people were like, one guy was like losing his mind over this. And I'm like, look, I'm like, he sent me a note asking me, so who's a flat earther here? I was like, I have no idea who. I was like, I'm not a flat earther or a ball earther. To me, it's not an either or question. It's a both and thing. Mm-hmm. I feel like what you were kind of saying, like there's the disc, then there's sort of the sphere, and then I think we're also dealing with the toroidal sort of like energy flowing, like, vortex kind of thing, right? Mm-hmm. So I feel like how you see it is dependent on sort of where you're at with your consciousness in any given moment.
Exactly.
And also the energetics and the magnetics of what's going on around you. Like, we have a very, strange changing energy field around us all the time. I don't think it is a consistent thing. The one thing that I will say, and this is just another way of sort of saying what you were about simulation, is we are living in some kind of construct for sure. Right. So we're living in something that is not like, we weren't just here, like all of a sudden, this is something that we have been somehow placed into, or something that has been overlaid on us. I remember listening to one of your, and this was maybe like a year back, maybe even longer, Sheree, you were talking about on one of your experiences that you were shown like that the earth was like in like a blanket or like a pea pod, and that the ayahuasca goddess or whatever was telling you that it was that we were moved, like it was flat and round, that we were moved from one to the other to protect us. Do you remember that? Can you tell us what you were talking about there?
You know what? That was such a powerful experience, that when you have a powerful psychedelic experience, especially with ayahuasca or DMT, because it's the spirit molecule, it's what comes out when you dream. It's very difficult to remember the strongest ones. But I will say that growing up as the daughter/granddaughter of a pastor, I learned sociology very early on. And I also learned how people manipulate other people. And as I got older, naturally, I went into sociology when I went to college. And I learned in sociology about group theory and things like that. And so I kind of applied group theory to the flat earth theory and the round earth theory and the holographic reality theory.
Yeah.
And to me, it seems like it is a matter of perspective, but it's also a matter of your environment. If your environment is all telling you you're an idiot for believing this, then eventually you'll come around to thinking that you were an idiot for a while and go back to believing in the round earth. If you are surrounded by flat earth people, then that's bad too, because then you're never going to be able to get to that holographic reality part.
Yeah. That's
and so, yes, it is programming to a certain extent. And that was my first thought when all of this started to come out and Chris started to become a flat earther. I was like, okay, well, wait a second, hold on.
She said, "You're not actually going to talk about this on the show, are you?"
Well, the only reason I did that was because I understood sociologically that you say one thing and then you immediately isolate that other 50%. If you say another thing, you immediately isolate the other 50%. So my choice was to kind of go straight down the middle with it. Like, I don't know. I do know that something's wrong here, but I don't know what it is. And I think that's the safest place to be. And that's kind of how you're a slider. You slide through and you get into what it really is, which it is both flat and round. It's according to your perspective, whether your optical lens is zooming in a certain way or not, and what we're really seeing is a construct.
I had a vision, because I've asked this question many times in the ayahuasca experiences. If it's flat or if it's round, what is this construct? And it doesn't quite line up with what I necessarily feel at this particular moment. But back then, what I was shown was two spheres, and the mother goddess was standing there or sitting off in the background. And this other sphere came and hit this other sphere. And she wailed out the most horrible cry, only like a mother losing her child. I mean, it was a horrible cry. And she went and she grabbed whatever she could and put a dome on top of it, like a protective dome. And that's what she showed me there. So I don't know, maybe there's some truth to that maybe our planet, something happened to it and we had to be quarantined or protected, or quarantine's not the right word, but isolated under.
It may actually be the right word. What you just described there sounds a lot to me like the Tiamat scenario.
Right.
You know, we have this asteroid belt that sits out there, and it's not accounted for, but there is a certain symmetry of the array of the planets as we know them, or what. When you start talking about space, forget talking about Earth. Emily and I talk about space and we're like, is there space? You know, and this is based even on talking to people who have been in secret space programs. But if we just take what we've literally been shown, we know the asteroid belt's out there. And the legends are that there was a planet that sat out there called Tiamat, which was destroyed as part of a cosmic war. And that, in fact, that impacted this planet. Velikovsky wrote about cataclysmic events that hit the Earth based on the Bible. Other writers have theorized on pass-bys of Mars, which would have created these gigantic swells in the planet as a result of the gravitational fields interacting. We don't know. But I do think that somewhere inside of the collective consciousness of the planet, which is reflected in us because we're children of it, there's a traumatic event that sits there. It's like a wound that we never healed. So when you were saying that, that was kind of the picture I was getting of that.
I've heard that story before. I haven't looked into it too much, but I am familiar with that. There may be some truth to that. The only thing that I can't get over is the fact that reality seems to have changed sometime around 2008 to 2012. For me, anyways, that seemed to be a marker. When I first met Sheree, we were filling up our water bottles at this reverse osmosis place around the corner from my house. And we had just been there about a week prior, 2 weeks prior, and it was gone. The building was gone. It didn't exist.
Even the pumping stations that you would use to fill up the water bottles, all the plumbing was gone. You don't get rid of plumbing overnight like that. That doesn't happen.
Right. So we started asking different guests, just kind of in passing, hey, you ever notice any weird anomalies with reality? And it sounds, crazy just right off the cuff, but some people started responding and saying, I remember these changes. And then the Mandela effect became a term. Obviously, we had nothing to do with coining the term, but other people started coming forward and saying, hey, I remember this reality. I remember this reality. And we started to unlock all these mysteries of what's going on with the time shifts. Frank Castle, one of our friends, came over to the house one time and he was looking for a hotel. Well, we just had a big, 3 or 4 different hotels, maybe more, just spring up overnight one night. And I said, Frank, there's a bunch of hotels here. And he said, I can't find any record of any hotels around your house. I said, well, don't worry about it. Just come and stay at the house. So I showed him the hotels when we were there. There was a Denny's in the parking lot. We went in and Frank asked one of the waitresses, hey, when did these hotels show up? And she goes, I don't know. They just popped up overnight one night. So other people were starting to notice it as well.
Yeah, I've had experiences like that my whole life. Like I was this was several years back. This was before any of this Mandela effect stuff was talking about. I was trying to explain to my friend the sort of parallel realities, possible wormholes, different things like that. And I said, look, have you had the experience? And this is a person who doesn't buy into a lot of that stuff. But I said, look, have you had the experience before where there's a little shopping center and there's a store you like in it, and you go back there, you found it one time and like, oh, you bought a bunch of cool stuff there, and you go back and not only is the store not there, but nobody knows what the heck you're talking about. She's like, yeah. I'm like, that's it right there. And so almost everybody, you can get them to admit to at least one of those. I've been having stuff like that my whole life. I mean, I've been having all sorts of kooky stuff. Freeway exits, rest stops disappearing, coming back. I had a weird one this summer where so for many, many years, I've been having this memory of an exit off of a freeway when I'm traveling places. And I've traveled the same roads many times in my life, going across the country, going back and forth between California to Texas. I've always been looking for this exit that I remember, and I've never been able to find it. Well, all of a sudden, this summer, in October, I went on a road trip to Utah and Colorado, which is places that I've really never been. And I'm in Utah the first day, and I'm driving down. I got off to go to my hotel, and I'm driving down the street. I'm like, holy fuck, this is the place. This is it. But I've never been there before. Right? So what is that? Right? So I've been having these kinds of things my whole life, but people, you can usually get them to cop to one of those little experiences, like what you were saying. Yeah. So some people are starting to refer to these things as personal Mandela effects. You know what I mean? Where it's just something which I kind of like that term. I experience some of those every day. You know what I mean? It was funny when the Mandela, so I've been experiencing that forever. Mandela effect comes along, and I guess the first one that I heard people talking about where it was a big thing was the Bernstein Bears. And I was like, oh yeah, well, this kind of stuff happens all the time. I had something happen to me the week before with what's his name? Owen Wilson, the actor Owen Wilson. So I was coming back from Austin, and I was, when you're in the airport and you're on the like flat escalators, the walkalator things, and there's an ad for a new movie with Owen Wilson on it. And I'm like, wait a second, didn't Owen Wilson die a few years ago? And there he is on the thing. So someplace where I was at one point, I remember seeing on the cover of People magazine that Owen Wilson was dead. So I had that experience, and then like a week later is the Berenstain Bears thing, and then it seems to have just like snowballed from there. You guys have done some really, I love that one video you guys did a few weeks back with the 5 Mandela effects proofs. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and sort of kind of your take on this whole thing?
Well, let me say this first of all. I remember back in 2005, 2006, picking up the Berenstain Bears book and thinking, this must be some cheap knockoff. And I didn't even think anything of it at the time because I saw it spelled Berenstain, and that was just my first instinct. Like, this is a cheap knockoff. But that one is the most interesting in my opinion, because the trademark attorney has called it Berenstain in several different places. Now, if the trademark attorney isn't going to get it right, that's what he does for a living. He gets things exactly right when it comes to names and whatnot.
His whole job.
Yeah. So you find evidence after evidence after evidence. There's another 80scartoons.net where up until, I want to say, 2002, 2003, I don't remember the date, it was called Berenstain Bears. And you had the entire episode list right there on that website, Berenstain Bears, and all of a sudden it just changes over to Berenstain.
It's like they were Jewish and then they weren't, right?
Yeah. The whole time, what happens. So there's another interesting one, though. And these are the most fascinating, the ones that change and then change back. Houston, we have a problem in the film Apollo 13. That was Houston, we've had a problem. It changed to Houston, we've had a problem for a period of time. And then it changed back to Houston, we have a problem. And you can go back to the YouTube videos and read the comments. And some people are like, hey, wait a minute, I remember it being Houston, we have a problem. But it's Houston, we have a problem in the video now. But you go back to the original audio from Apollo 13, and now they don't say Houston, we have a problem. They say Houston, we've had a problem in the original Apollo 13 audio. So I don't know what the heck is going on there.
So
but
go ahead.
One after another. Luke, I am your father. That's the way that Earl Jones remembers it. He said it many times before.
Well, and people that are looking at the Berenstain Bears, obviously they could say, well, it was 25 years ago when you read that book. That there's no way you can remember reading that when you were 6 and remembering the right spelling. I mean, that's stupid. But I worked at a library from the time I was 12 to the time I was 22. For 10 years, I worked at a library as a children's librarian. I know it said Berenstain Bears.
Yeah.
I know how to spell. I know I know what books that I would give to children, and I know that it said Berenstain Bears. And I even showed my grandmother, and she's a pastor's wife. She takes a look at it and goes, oh, that's weird. But then within 30 minutes, I show it to her again, and she said, well, it looks kind of right. And I started wondering, okay, well, I wonder if only people that are really looking for it actually find it, whereas the people that don't want to find it and don't want to have anything change about their reality, they don't want to make anything better or worse or anything, they don't want to change anything, they just want solid, they'll trick themselves into believing that there hasn't been a Mandela effect when there actually has.
Well, here's another interesting one. People remember an island off the coast of Australia to the west of Australia. And some people say it's New Zealand. And then you can find remnants like in Dazed and Confused, where they're spinning the globe and you see this island. Well, a couple of weeks ago, we had a guest on. I don't remember who it was. We weren't even talking about Mandela effect. And he started talking about this ancient island off the coast of Australia that you can still find with satellite images, but it's just underwater now. And I stopped him and I said, wait a minute, what's the name of this island? And I wrote it down and I was looking it up, trying to find more information about this island. But the guest just comes out of nowhere and says there was an island right there, but it's an ancient island.
Yeah.
So why do we have remnants on modern maps of ancient islands? And then now people have memories of this ancient island that existed that never really actually existed, supposedly.
So have you guys heard of, so I have a couple things to say about all this. Have you guys heard of like the theory of timeline wars, and that there's been people kind of coming in and cutting out pieces, like there's been some kind of catastrophic kinds of things happening, whether it be from, interdimensional technologies that have been screwing with us and whatever. But there's people who are basically coming in and like almost like editing timelines, right? And they're something got fucked up and they're trying to fix it and put it back, but they put it back wrong, right? And then maybe they go back and correct it. Like, to me, like, I think that's a possibility. I think there's the possibility of we're just dealing with a bunch of parallel realities, and that there's some people, and I'd say people like us, who have developed the ability to move between them. And so we have memories of this other one. We see this one now. Later, we see something else. Like for my dad, everything is always how it was. Like, you know what I mean? He does. There was one the other day that he was like, "Oh, that's funny," but he just thought that, he can't accept that, like, that's a reality for someone. He thinks they're just remembering wrong. He's a super duper duper smart guy. But like, so I think that, like, the more open you are to that things aren't constant, like, the more you're kind of, there's some people who it's either this or that. It might have changed once, but you're noticing it changed back. It changed a little. There's a comment on this about the fact that you're finding all these intricacies within. You're moving between all these. There's realities within the reality where it's changed a little bit. And because you're so free, and I find myself this way as well, to sort of, I understand that that's how this works. I don't think we're living in a constant thing, that we're having a different experience of it.
Right. And what's interesting about this particular phenomenon is that there's people from different timelines. So the people that don't remember Berenstein, they legitimately do not remember Berenstein because it didn't exist in their timeline. The people that remember Berenstain, so on and so forth. It would be interesting to ask your father about Lucy. We have some explaining to do, because that doesn't exist in this timeline.
Lucy, you have some explaining to do.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I don't know.
I'll say you've got some splaining to do.
Doesn't exist anymore. Never happened.
Never happened.
Well, the interesting one that came up just about a week or two. So I monitor different groups and boards that are talking about it. A couple, one or two that you're in as well, because that's where I saw your video and whatnot. And so the one that came up the other day that was like the easiest one for me to sort of run on tests on people without freaking them out or getting them pissed off or whatever, was the whole Franklin Delano thing. So there's the Delano and the Delano, and I'm like, what the fuck, Delano? It's not Delano. It's Delano and his wife is Eleanor, right? Mm-hmm. But there's people who are swearing it's Delano. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to test this out. I'm going to like pick someone who I totally like and who like is not like us, but is open to all the things that I talk about, and she's totally cool. And I'm just going to, like, out of the blue, without any setup, just ask her. Be like, I said, what was Franklin Roosevelt's middle name? She's like, Delano. And I was like, what the fuck? Because I had that moment where, like, I was like, so, okay, so are we from different places? Like, I just had that thought in my head, and I'm like, wow, that's interesting. I was like, wow. I said, because where I come from, she doesn't know anything about this. So where I come from, it's Franklin Delano. And she looked at me like the same way I looked at her. But think about this. If we're dealing with like multiple realities, right? Multiple parallel timelines and things like that, it would make perfect sense that one that was just slightly off of ours, where we remember it as Delano and Eleanor, that in a slightly different one, almost everything would be the same, but it would be Delano and his wife would be Ellen or Eileen or something like that, right? And there'd be very small variations, unlimited amounts of these over and over and over and over. And I think one of the things that's happening right now, we'll call it shifting consciousness or the paradigm breaking down, but realities are starting to merge. And that's part of also why there's so much like chaos and why people are wearing vaginas on their heads and yelling and screaming about things that don't make sense. And right? What do you think about that?
It is
snowflakes
insane.
Are shedding tears in mass. Sorry.
I have a theory for you. I don't mean to switch the subject. It's still kind of on this subject. Have you heard of the Donald Trump time travel theory?
So I heard that.
Yes.
Was it Kev Baker talking about that last week or something like that?
Oh, was he talking about that? Okay. We started making a video on it, but we never got around to finishing it because of the project came up. But his uncle is John Trump. John Trump was given Nikola Tesla's research, and he basically told the government, no, there's nothing here. But I wonder if he kept the research for himself, and now Trump has been going back and forth trying to fix the timeline. It's a crazy thing.
Well, Randy, tell them about your post. Tell them about your post that got everybody pooping in their pants. The one about
Which one?
The one with the Observer.
Oh yeah, we found one of the observers from Fringe in live footage that Fox shot as Trump and his son and Melania were walking down Pennsylvania Avenue after the inaugural address, and we face matched it. And so we have September, who is one of the observers in the Fringe TV series, standing there beside Donald Trump.
Did you guys ever watch Fringe?
No, no.
Okay. Oh my God. Okay. Well, okay. That's, you guys need to watch that. I would love to have you guys watch that, and then we could go down a whole rabbit hole about that.
Okay.
Basically, in Fringe, they're dealing with a situation where there's colliding universes and people are like, it's basically, Fringe is exactly accurate as to what's going on right now. Everything that can be tried is being tried. There's all sorts of crazy experiments going on, mind control, genetic chimera stuff, parallel timelines, crossing into other universes, time travel, anything you can think about, they're doing it, right? So the observers are basically people, like a group of scientists sent back from the future to observe what's going on now, because they've destroyed their environment in the future, and they're coming back to try and basically sort of,
Mend it.
in their mind, what they're trying to do is sort of steal the future from the people who still have an organic Earth. Okay, but what it really is humans in the future who have become so obsessed with technology and so technologically advanced that they put tech into themselves, and it basically, they became very, very intelligent and logical, but lost all of their humanity. And if you look at them, they actually look like the middle step between people and grays, right? Like that's what the observers look like. So this group traveled back, and a few of them started to, get a little romantic about humanity, and so sort of started trying to help them. You have to watch Fringe. It's the best. Like it is what is happening. It is you will find so many good nuggets in there. You will love it. But basically, they're these bald guys. They're all bald, and when they first start the Fringe series, they're having all these weird things happen, and all of these scenes, there's these bald guys that all look the same, and then they go back and they find them throughout history, showing up showing up at important events. This is it. This is September, and the black and white on the right, and that's the guy. Look at that.
Interesting.
That is not Photoshop.
So Randy made this post.
What's up with the fake arms?
What was that, Chris?
The fake arms. I noticed this guy, but it was
There
a different
are the fake arms. Yeah, this is, both of the security guards to the right and left of Trump are also wearing fake hands, which I think are covering some kind of weapon.
Oh.
Interesting.
But you guys
now understand that I did this as satire.
Yeah, people
But it
freaked out.
freaked a lot of people out.
They thought that he was saying that now everything is fine because the timeline has been corrected and Donald Trump is president. He has people like everybody's so taking everything as a Trump versus Hillary thing that they were missing the irony of like what's going on here. We have now fiction becoming complete reality. The other cool thing about here, show them that picture. The other cool, really interesting thing about Fringe, there's tons of them, but one of my favorites. This is David Robert Jones. Okay, he's in the first season and a half of Fringe, he was jumping, like time traveling and jumping back and forth between universes and creating holes in the universes, basically. So David Bowie's real name is David Robert Jones. And when David Bowie, look at David Bowie. And I was like, when David Bowie died, I'm like, wait a second. That's when
there's scenes in Fringe where David Robert Jones has his face wrapped in a mummy wrap that looks exactly like the Lazarus video that David Bowie did
right before he died.
Allegedly left Earth.
So David Robert Jones's face was falling apart from like disassembling and reassembling from time travel and all that kind of stuff. And he had, at the end, he has this like white bandage around, and that's what David Bowie has. And I'm like, wait a second. Look at all the things David Bowie does. And he looks crazy sometimes. Like, he looked always different. Sometimes he looked like a space alien. Sometimes he looked like some kind of weird zoo animal, right? Like, wait a second. What if he was if you think about all the things he said, the names of his song, he's the man that fell to earth, he's the man that sold the world. Wait a second. What if he traveled into the future and sold us into the position that we're in now? Right? So when that happened, when David Bowie died and I found out his name was David Robert Jones, I was like, what is going on here? There's so many of those things in Fringe. Check it out. You guys will really like it.
We'll have to check that out.
We have to check it out now.
I have to mention here that Terrence McKenna said that what would happen once he didn't know at first. He said it's kind of like because people would ask him what's going to happen in 2012 because he had this theory and he called it the time wave theory. Yeah. And I'm sorry. And he said, it's really hard to tell because it's kind of like asking someone at 4 at 4 a.m. what's sunrise going to look like? We don't know until it comes. And whenever it starts to come, then we'll be able to tell more about what it's going to be like. And he said, but what I think is happening is as we are moving towards 2012, it's kind of like circling the drain. And when you start to circle the drain, it goes kind of slow at first, but then it spins up faster and faster and faster. And he said, once it hits December 21st, 2012, it's going to reach a level of complexity that is so unbelievably dense that it's going to change everything.
And we move towards singularity. Everything that can happen does happen. And that's what we're seeing, overlapping timelines. Everything that can happen is happening.
I love that video of him when he's sitting at the computer explaining this theory, and he's talking about how hemlines are rising and falling in sync with empires rising and falling. You know what I mean? Like, I love that. I love it. Yeah. All right.
Everything works together.
Yeah, it's perfect. Yeah. I think this is a good time to take a break. And then when we come back, we're going to ask everyone to move over and join us for the second hour at offplanetradio.com. We're going to get into dance music and psychedelic realms. But before we go out, Chris has been kind enough to grace us with a track of his. You want to tell everybody what we're listening to?
It was a track I did just kind of on a whim a while back when I first started smoking DMT. And it's called Third Eye Open. It's a track I completely forgot about, but it's obviously starting to come back to the surface now. So,
all right, excellent. So we'll listen to that, and we'll be back in just a few minutes. This is Off Planet Radio.
Your off-planet radio listening experience will return shortly.
We were in the center of the Amazon basin. We had come there to explore tryptamine hallucinogens. These are short-acting, very powerful psychedelic drugs. It is true that when you smoke DMT, for example, at a sufficiently high and prepared dose, you get L's. Everybody does.